Well, hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to introduce our sales engineer, Eli Chadwick, who will run today's demo, and I'm Anne Harper, the Chief of Staff here at Koordinates. So this webinar is to show you how with your own coordinate site, you can manage and deliver your aerial surveying and mapping data to your staff or your clients. If you've been with us before, you'll know the drill, but I'm going to give you a short overview of Koordinates as a platform, a quick slideshow. Then Eli is going to give you a very short orientation of how to set up a site. And then he'll go into how to manage the permissions for the data of your end users, and then how you can import and manage your aerial imagery derived formats and how you can create services from them, and then how your customers would use those services. If you have any questions, please share them in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen there. I will answer what I can. I'm not the most technical person, so anything that I can't, I will take to our team offline and then follow up with you later. Also, this webinar will be recorded and we'll share a link probably next week. So, about Koordinates. With Koordinates, you get your own data platform, and we have designed this to keep the training burden really, really low so that your customers and your collaborators can get up and running and access the data that they need very quickly. It is self-service format translation, so your users can preview and export your data into their favorite GIS formats, or if they're engineers, say, using CAD software, they can take it in the formats they need, and it is the coordinate transformation all sits within the site itself, so they're able to pick the coordinate system that they need for their software. APIs are automatically created, so once you've loaded your data into your coordinate site, this tab will appear and you can stream the data and create your own API key, or your users can create their own API keys, and it's all hosted by us. Koordinates is in the cloud, so this means you can do everything in the browser itself. We do have a desktop app and APIs if you'd like to use those, but you don't actually need them. So if you have customers with quite locked down IT setups, then this is great for them. It is scalable and performant, so that's particularly important with aerial imagery and aerial products because they can be quite large. We do have customers who are sharing emergency management data through Koordinates, and they're able to load up to like 2 terabyte sizes at any time, and Koordinate scales as you need it. This is also really good for you if you have unknown data requirements, so you're not worrying about your hardware and what it needs to look like in a couple of years' time, because we take care of all that for you. We are certified for information security by ISO. We also have really rich permissions architecture. So from a platform side, we've got a lot of security and all our staff are trained. Then from your side, you have control of the permissions for your data sets. So you may know of Koordinates from the open data, which is available to the public, but we also have the ability to share within really small groups, which is super important for those sensitive data sets that you may have. Here's a quick overview of how it works. If you have your data, so today we're really going to cover the rasters, point clouds, and newly 3D tiles, and grid data, which are the majority of aerial survey products. You can load them into your coordinate site here using the data management web app. If you want to, you can schedule APIs to load it in, and also if you use a tool like FME, you can schedule updates through that. Then your customers can come along and take it through the portals in the formats that they need. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to Eli so he can show you what the platform looks like.
So today I'm going to cover off the ins and outs of how you would handle your aerial mapping data and basically get it from your, however you captured it, device off into the hands of your customers that want to use it. So the scenario here is you've gone out, you've flown in some form of something or other, you've got a bunch of data and you want to surface it. You sign up at Koordinates, you get your own site, you get your own URL here with your own corporate branding, and you load your data in. So first things first, what are we looking at here? I'm sure a lot of you already know how this works, but for those that don't, I'll just give you a quick overview of the UI here. So at the top here, 3 buttons, manage. This takes me to the back end. So If you have an admin seat, that's how you get in to do the configuration of all of the bits and pieces. I'll go there shortly. The data button opens what we call the data browser. These are all different data sets that exist on the platform that you can interact with in various different ways. And the map button, that turns the map on and off. Something I should point out, you can have multiple maps here. You can put data into different maps. They will stay there. When you log out, log back in, they will still be there. And we also have this new concept of a map viewer, which is somewhat analogous to a web map. Essentially, you can load your data into a map viewer, send a URL off to a customer. They can do all the same things I'm about to do here. And it just is a cool way to package your data up and send it off to someone that knows nothing about the platform but needs to view the data somehow or other. Down the left here, a bunch of filters. We've got a region filter. Every layer that goes in, we geotag. So you can say stuff like, show me what you've got for this area. Categories, these are all defined by the publisher. So you define a bunch of categories, allocate layers to it, and it just allows your customers to find those data sets. Data type, what layers do we support? So we do vector, point lines, polygons, point clouds, layers, LAS, stored as COPSI, rasters, mainly geotiffs, but able to be exported in a number of different formats, and grids, think models, grid data, DEMs, DSMs, DTMs, all that sort of thing. And then down here, we've got tables, think spreadsheets, sets, data bundled together, repositories. I'm not going to go there today, but those are cart repositories, which are Git repositories. We're going to go over that in the next webinar if you're interested. And documents, PDFs, docs. So really the point I'm getting at here is you can put a bunch of different data types in, control who can see what, manage it all in one place, and have a multitude of people accessing those layers. This group is quite important. So I'm going to start with some Lake Roto Iti data, which is just down the road from where I live. So when your users come to the site, if you have allocated them to the Lake Roto Iti group, they come along, they've got any data sets that you've made available to them. So this is all that they can see when they arrive. They can see nothing else. It keeps all your data nicely segmented off by customer. And now these data sets, what are we looking at? So here I've got, I will give a nod to Lynn's, got this off the Lynn's data set just to give you an idea of how that might work. So this guy here, aerial imagery, we call this a data card. It's got a bunch of information about the data set. So metrics, how often the data set has been accessed, a thumbnail of what it looks like, some about information, any licensing that you might have applied to it, which by default you've accepted by signing up to the Koordinates site. Metadata, if there is metadata managed alongside the data set, we support ISO 19115 and Dublin Core, not to be confused with this, which a lot of people call metadata. This is more just description stuff. If you do have XML metadata, we will harvest that out of there. We also harvest the title, so you can control the look and feel of the layer using metadata if that's your chosen approach. Some details around the layer. What is the CRS that it's stored in, or projection? What we do is we store the data in the CRS that the publisher published it. The users, when they go to do their export, can reproject into whatever makes sense for their task. Layer ID represents this layer. If you're going to do any programmatic interaction through our APIs, you're going to need the layer ID to identify the layer. What type of data is it? Raster, and some history and version control bits and pieces. So important to note that users the publisher can at any time with any of these layers, vector, raster, grid, point cloud, can upload additional tiles, update their data set. I'll go through that process a wee bit later. But essentially, if you wanted to make changes to a data set, the URL will persist. You do not have to do a fresh greenfields install. You can push more data into an existing layer, so your customers don't have to learn what the new URL is that they might have plumbed into some program. Services and APIs I will cover in more depth later, but this tab exists here and it shows you what services have been generated against the layer, and mention that the data that you publish has these services. The services that are generated are going to depend on the type of data that it is. So in this case, we're looking at aerial imagery orthos that will be consumed by WMTS, which you can pipe off into various consuming applications, and I'll go through that a little bit later. So you've come along, you found your data set, you want to have a look at it. We add it to the map. So now I'm over here. I can flick the map into 3D. I'm going to add a few layers to it. So we've got a DEM to add, and we've also got a point cloud to add. Once I've added all the data to the map, I can in fact close down my data browser. Being 3D, you can do all the kind of cool things. I quite like this view. I live over here somewhere. You can navigate in 3D mode, lots of tilting, and essentially check out the data that you've loaded up. So what we've got here is there's the point cloud. If I was to turn off the base map, gives you a better idea of the data sets that I've loaded in. So that's your DEM. That's the point cloud loading. I'll close off my DEM. Underneath it, I've got my imagery. And I just kind of like turning off the base map because it gives you a better idea of what you're actually looking at. So the point cloud, for instance, is much easier to understand in this mode. There's a killer hot pool over here somewhere, but you can only get to it by boat, sadly. Now, if I just turn these layers back on, the first thing I wanted to, so the idea here is you've loaded all the data into a web map. You want to share it with an end user. I'll go over the permissions when we get to the configuration steps that are involved, but essentially what you can do is I can come in here and click share. I can decide to share the web map privately. I can share it with a group. So I've created this Late group and I can hit share. So what that's doing under the hood is it is building out this web map, which I've foolishly called 3 layers, but I could have given it a better name up here. I can now send this off to end users by copying the URL here. And if I was to email that URL to my customers, they will receive it, they click on it, and they get exactly the same view with exactly the same layers in it that I was just looking at there. So this is how you can pretty simply distribute your data. I didn't do any vector data. Often there's vector data in the mix as well. In fact, usually we are dealing in vector data, but today we're looking at mainly sort of air-derived formats. So your user gets the map. They can do all of the things that I was just doing. They can blast around, look at the things, and they can also, I'll get out of here and go back to here. So once they get their map, they can hit the export button. They can crop down to the area that they're interested in. So if I crop it down to about where I think those hot pools are, there, so. As you change the crop, you will see down here that the size of the download will be adjusted. As you change the formats of the data sets that people are going to download, that will also have an impact. So for instance, GeoJPEGs are smaller than GeoTIFFs. If I bump that up, it's going to say, yep, right, that's about twice as big. You can get the point cloud in a number of different formats. So we don't really expect most people to be doing this. In fact, a lot of aerial mapping companies don't really want their end users to download these huge data sets. But if they do need to, if they want to do analysis on it, then this is how they'll do it. So you can get that as layers being compressed, LAS, not compressed. You can get it into a geo package, shapefiles, geodatabases, CSV. It's going to be quite big, but and you can also get it in recap. Or in DWG. So that's kind of another cool use case is getting the data out to your CAD people. Means that you don't have to transform your lasers into DWG formats. You just load it up one time and your users can grab it in whatever format that they are after. Up here, that's the horizontal CRS. So, NZTM, stuff like that. I can reproject into whatever makes sense for the area that I'm in. And I can also do the same with the vertical coordinate reference system. For grids and raster, there are a bunch of different data formats that you can pull it out as, KEA, PDF, ASCIIs, or for a GeoTIFF, there are more. So again, the type of data is going to determine the different formats that you can pull out. Most are supported, and we are continually adding other formats as we go. So like one of the new kids on the block is 3D tiles. That's about to go live fairly shortly. They are pretty cool things. So then the user basically just goes create export, and that will start the export going. It'll spin away up here, and whenever it's ready, they can pull it down. I can rename this map to Rock 20, makes a bit more sense. And then if I come over here and say I want to update my content changes, that just changes whatever I've done to the content of the map. So now I can close out of there. Yep, close. If I go back to my portal or data browser, under the data type now, under map viewers, I should have a new one, and it is called Lake Road T, the guy that I just made. I hit view. That should throw that map viewer back up into the window here, and that has all those layers in it configured. So just really showing you that you can make changes. I could add some vector data to it, go back up here, save it, send that off. And yeah, that's how users are going to interact with it. You can also access the service definitions from in there, but I'll get to that a wee bit later. Cancel, close, close, and close. So let's get out of here now and go into manage. So this is the backend coordinates. You probably have or I would say a fair few of you have seen the front end. I would imagine that a bunch of you haven't seen the back end. So this could be kind of interesting. This is how you, as the administrator of the site, get the data that you have sitting on your server or whatever have you. Could be up in an S3 bucket. This is how you get it into the coordinates ecosystem, and from there it flows out to your customers. First thing I want to cover off is the permissions and how we do that. So the way you do it, I'm actually going to load a few layers from a job that a friend of mine did here in Rotorua. It was an electric go-kart track that was about to be built, and we went out and did some drone capture for it and got some orthos and some DSMs. Really small data sets, so good for doing quickly. So I'll just go through how you would go about loading that into your site. So first thing I would do is I'd come in here and I'd create a group, and I'm just going to call it go-kart. There's a bunch of more things in here. I won't go into them. I'm skipping over a whole lot of things. Don't have all day. So I've got a group now called go-kart. I've got myself. I could add other users to it. So whoever I wanted to be sending these layers to, I would say add user. I would search for them. If they had registered with my site, then I can add them to the group. If they haven't registered with the site, I can go into users. I can invite them by the email address, add them to my go-kart group. They will get an email. As soon as they create their password and their identity, they'll log in. They can see anything in the group that I've made available to them. So that's how you do your groups and your user management. Important to note that we don't charge for end users. You can have millions of them, much the same as you. I'm sure you're all on, or a few of you will be on LINs. You don't pay for that, right? You can do whatever you like up there. Same with a private site. You don't actually charge your end users. The only billing component is the administrators. And a business plan gives you 4 of those, and you can add on more if you need to. So you've built your group, you've put your users in it. Now we want to load up some data. So for that, I head back on over to manage. I actually had this one layer here. If I go back to the front, I had this layer, which is, I've called it Crankworks. It's from a long time ago. We've got this mountain biking thing in Rotorua, which I love, called Crankworks. What I've done is I've loaded up a few tiles from, this was a long time ago, and I purposely didn't load this one because I wanted to just show you how you'd go about updating an existing raster layer. So to do that, if I go back into manage, I go over to upload, and I'm going to go find my tile, which I have sitting here. So your tiles can be either just, you could select a bunch off your disk, you could have them in a folder, you could have them in a zip, really makes no difference. So I just want the one tile, I'm going to select it, hit open, I'm going to assign it to my go-kart group, and hit upload. That now is going to copy that file, that tile, up to my site, and it will appear over here in a folder, much the same as this. In fact, that is that tile. And from there, I can then do I can then upgrade the layer. So that's a tile. I want to do an update. I want to update my Crankworks layer. And in here, there's a bunch of different settings. The key one is keep existing layer tiles and append replace new tiles. So you might be either, in this case, I'm putting a whole new tile in. I might just have new tiles that I want to add, a more recent flight. This is how you would update your existing layer. Shows you what you've already got. And I'm about to throw in whatever that was called, 4014. Anyway, I'll go back over to manage data. Let's grab some more layers. I'm going to upload a couple more little tiny ones. I'm going to grab this vector layer, put it in GoKart. This should successfully show you what the import process looks like. We do a scan of all incoming data sets, make sure that all the geometries are OGC compliant. So in here, I've got a vector layer. So it's, I think this was a polygon. I'm going to do an import. I'll just call it GoKart boundary. That's fine. I am going to assign it to the GoKart group. In here is where you set all of the things that are going to affect the way that that data set is displayed in the browser. And now I hit the import button and that guy is happy. So that layer is coming in. Don't have to wait for that. That's a vector layer arriving. I will also grab a DEM. Looks like. Again, assign it to the GoKarts. Upload. So that's moved it up from my device to the cloud, which, by the way, we're in AWS, so everything's going into S3 buckets. If your data was in an S3 bucket, it's going to be by far the simplest way to pull it across. So I'm going to import the grid data from there. I'm going to do an import. I'm just going to go with the default name of it into the GoKart group. I'm not going to bother us, like, this is minimum viable product. And that's going to come in now. So that guy there is arriving. You don't have to wait around for either of those things. I think the only thing in the whole system that you do have to stay on that screen for is the actual upload. But other than that, you can set things going. You can change configurations. You can make updates. And you don't have to stay there. You can go off and do other things. It's all happening on the server. Cool. So that is some layers uploaded. Now I want to have a look at the services. So if we head back over to the front end, and if I sort by the group called, I've got those layers that I loaded. These are the 3 that I'm particularly interested in. What we can do is add them all to a map. So map, map, map. Close out of the data browser. And now I can play around with my ordering here. So it would probably make sense to pull the imagery down to the bottom to put the vector stuff up the top and maybe turn the DSM off. So there I've got my vector layer sitting on top of the ortho photo. I can do the same thing I was just talking about earlier by creating a web map and share that with my end users. So I'm sort of halfway there in that regard. When the end user gets it, they can interact with the data in a few different ways. So under the ellipsis, I can hit show data table. That will show me all of the attribution that's in the data set. I can also click on the map. That's just doing a spatial query, and it's going to show me information about the tiles that I've hit. I can export just one tile. I can export the entire set. But what I wanted to talk about is, if I hit the info button, this takes me to that data card. I mentioned earlier that there's services and APIs. So say if I wanted to access this particular layer, if I'd created a cartography against it or a style, I'd also have a WMTS. That is how the tiles get generated. By default, every vector layer will have a WFS. You can use our spatial query API to do simple lat-long type spatial queries of the layer. So build an external application and talk to this as a server of data. Don't ever come to the site if that's what your use case is. Esri REST, this is the one I was going to show you. So I can access this as an Esri REST service by clicking on this particular link here. What I would have to have done first is created a API key. To do that, I come into here. Minimum scope is data access. If you were doing a bunch of programming stuff with like Python or something, you'd want to go into manual scope and you would want to expand the scope of your API key to whatever it is that you wanted to do. And your user that the API is loaded against would have to have those permissions as well. Data access is all good. Let's just call it go-kart and go add. So it's made my new key. Don't have to copy that. It's stored up here. But now when I come down to this, I can say, right, that is my key. I'm going to plug it into my feature service, grab a copy of it, and I could just paste this into a browser, and that should show me a bog standard feature service. I could head over to AGOL and say, let's make a new item. What are we going to do? I'm going to make a URL. I'm going to drop it in here. It recognizes that as a web service. I say next. Good for the defaults. He does tags, really. Save that. And that should be the beginnings of a web map, which I can open in a map viewer. And it's one of the least spectacular vector layers you'll ever see, but there it is. So now we could do all of the bits and pieces in here. What I also wanted to do, though, was a more likely use case in aerial and mapping world is going to be this imagery. We want to get that. We want to hit the info. I want to go to the services and APIs. I want it to get it as a WMTS, so I can plug it into ArcGIS Online or whatever you're using. So again, I'm going to use my go-kart API key. I'm going to select that. I'm going to head on over to here, and I'm going to add another layer from URL. This time I'm going to paste the layer that I just grabbed. Great, it's a WMTS, correct. That is that, yep, add it to the map. Awesome. So now I've got a web map. Any of the Esri people will know what they can do now. You can go off and track that into a web app, make some widgets, do some things, save it with some people. It's now basically headed off into a whole nother ecosystem. So that data is data that you've loaded into your coordinates site and piped off to here. You're not having to use any credits because the data is not hosted in here. So it has a few advantages. We've got customers in the Northern Hemisphere that are pulling terabyte-sized WMTSs down, and it seems to work pretty well. Might help that Redlands is in the Northern Hemisphere. Perhaps it's faster like that. I don't know. But you can also grab those URLs, these guys here. You can put them into ArcMap. You can put them into ArcPro. You can put them into QGIS. In fact, on the subject of QGIS, if I hop on over to QGIS, just thought I would mention that. Say you've got end users that are using QGIS. We've got a widget, or what are they called here? Plugins. So you can go up into plugins and you can install the Coordinates plugin. It is free. It will plumb directly once you log in. It will plumb directly into your coordinate site. Any data that you've got stored up in Coordinates, you can pull down into your project. So if I just replicate what I was just doing there, I've got my go-kart survey imagery from Rotorua. I hit add, it's going straight in as a service. So that's sitting in the right location. Let me zoom back out, make sure I'm in the right place. That looks about right. Yep. So that's coming there. I can also go grab any of the layers that I've got up there. So there's my go-kart boundary. I can add that. So vector layer. These are services. So these are coming in as XYZ tile services. I can also get them as data. So I could, for instance, say I want to get a copy of that data. I'm going to clone it and I'm going to put it into a new folder called go-karty. Not. So create my folder. Set it all up. I could do a spatial filter on it if it was a massive layer. I didn't want the whole thing. It's a tiny layer. So this is doing a clone. This is our cart operation, wrapper around Git. It's how we do our distributed version control. That will now put that into a repo sitting on my hard drive. I've got the layer. I can add it to my map. big difference between these two layers is this yellow one, if I turn the other one off, boundary, turn them both off. So now if I turn this guy back on, that is actually data. It is sitting in my hard drive here. I will have pulled it down. It's sitting in my repos folder. So this is where it lives. So in there, I've got it as a geo package. Can do different formats. We default to geo package. Could turn that into an RDBMS. Could use SQL Server. A few options there. In any case, that's data sitting on my hard drive. So I can now do joins with it. I can do more special query type things. I can update the styles. I can also, which the next webinar is about, make some edits into a push and send that straight back up to the server. So that's in fact what we're going to talk about on the next one, is how would you manage your data using this cart system. Probably not such an aerial survey thing, but you might, for instance, want your end users to be able to push changes back up to your layer. I kind of doubt it, but in any case, that functionality does exist. So if I go back over to here, I've now got my map service. I've got my map. I can share my map. My data is all loaded. End users that can come to the site can see all of the layers. So those ones that I was just loading should have appeared. Yep, they're these two down here. I had wisely already imported them in case I got any jips going on with the internet, but seems to be happy today. So yeah, I think that will just about do for that lot. In summary, pretty easy way to load all your data into a site and make it available to your end users to consume in a ton of different ways. So now I think we'll go back to Anne.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Eli. We actually had a couple of questions come in and we weren't able to show our new 3D tile capability that's coming out today, but we will be showing that really soon. We had a question about that though, so I'm just going to read it out. You might know it, Eli. We've got an attendee who is using DJI Terra to make the models and is currently using .b3dm files, and many of them for a single model. It can do other file types as well. Once you have things live, what will be the best file type and best way to share with clients? So would that be 3D tiles, the OGC format, or do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, we store them in that format, and it basically becomes a service that we wrap a data card around and load it into the map, and users can then stream that out. It's in JSON format. An example would be tileset.json, stuff like that. That's going to be the easiest way to get it in there.
Oh, cool. Thank you. And I've got one other about metadata. So is it assumed that the additional tile inherits the XML metadata from the other data in the group, or is this done elsewhere, i.e. group and data set?
Oh yeah, so the XML is at the dataset level. So yes, the former of the two. That the XML metadata is stored alongside the data. So when you download it, you'll get the XML set down, you'll get the data down, and you'll get the metadata down. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I've got another one. Do we have an on-device SDK, such as for iOS or Android? So something that can deal with all the maps, display and interaction, cope with being offline for periods of time, pre-caching to avoid high expensive data usage. If the app author wanted to add and edit other custom features, is that something that needs to be stored within Koordinates, or could that be managed on device?
Yeah, so it depends on the format, really. Like with we do not have an SDK, is the first answer. One of the areas we're going to be looking at enhancing is potentially our Esri feature services. We get a lot of requests for them to be able to do the sync operation. So we're looking at potentially supporting sync in the future as well. So users will be able to write back to that service and do edits and things like that.
Oh, awesome. And we've got another question. Could we also add a point cloud? We support point cloud, don't we?
Yep. They were point clouds from the lake that I was showing. So yeah, the way we do that really is you would you can upload COPSI, LAS, or LAS. We store them as COPSI for streaming into the map viewer, and then when people download it, they can pick whether they want to get LAS or LAS. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Eli, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. We've had a really great turnout. If you're interested in how Koordinates could work for your business, please do get in touch and we can set up a call to demo the workflows that would be of most interest to you. For product updates, webinar announcements, and anything else, we do post on LinkedIn pretty regularly, and we post all of these webinar series onto our YouTube channel. So please follow us there. And this will be recorded and sent out to everybody who has attended today. So we really appreciate your time and learning about Koordinates, and we're just planning our last webinar for the year, which will be coming out in December. So we'll be posting about that soon. So yeah, thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your week.